The Festival of Transport takes place in War Memorial Park just south of the town centre in Basingstoke. It's split into two sections, clubs and groups in one area and individual and commercial vehicles in the other. Now in part 2 of our visit to the show, we're going to take you around the other half and see what's there. This Zephyr may look like any other you'd see on the road from the front, but once you move around to the side, it's anything but the normal family saloon you'd see in the 1960s. Utes are a really special type of vehicle, not one we got much of in the UK, and frankly more's the pity. The conversion on this one looks to have been extremely well done. It looks like it just rolled out the factory looking like this, so kudos to whoever built it, it's really well done. Next to it, another pickup, this time of considerable scale, a Chevrolet C20. I'm not sure what engine this one has since things get swapped around so much in these trucks. For all I know, it could have an LS tucked inside, but C20s seem to have generally been a 327 or 5.4 litre V8 from the factory for the 1965 model year, which we see here. It has probably one of the most even coverings of patina I've seen, which hasn't gone deep into the rust, and it all looks well matched, so maybe it's not actually had that much in the way of bodywork over the years. Definitely something you could daily drive and not worry about it. And going up in scale once again, we enter into the commercial vehicle section with this enormous Scammell heavy haulage rig, and this one I believe has been swapped from the original 10 litre petrol engine to an 11 litre Cummins diesel, and if that's the case, I have no doubt this can move some seriously heavy loads. Everything about it is huge, it's hard to convey on camera, but here's a pulley block. And next to those Scammells, another heavy haulage truck, this one bearing the name of a local firm, H. Judd & Son. The Foden DG had a few different Gardner LW engine options, and I'm assuming, since this one is for heavy loads, this would have had the 6-cylinder version. The blocks were actually modular and used combinations of 2 and 3-cylinder castings to make up either 4, 5 or 6-cylinder blocks. And next to it is a Ford Canadian military pattern truck used for timber hauling by the same firm. Next up, another Foden DG with a Gardner 5LW, and here another Scammell Explorer, also engine swapped, but instead of a Cummins, this one appears to have the 6LW diesel engine, and worked well into the 1980s for the British Territorial Army before eventually being retired. I'd love one of these, but even shedding a few cars from the fleet, there's no way my drive would take the weight. And it absolutely dwarfs what is actually a fairly normal sized vehicle next to it, a Steyr Puch Haflinger from the Cold War era. Designed as a lightweight utility vehicle, it only weighs 660 kilos with an air-cooled flat twin for power. Allegedly, 4 strong people can lift it, but it's still sturdy enough to carry a half-ton off-road thanks to the 4-wheel drive system. Going back up in scale again, we have an International Harvester Loadstar 1600. The 1600 was actually the lowest level of the Loadstar range, which might be what you'd expect for a government vehicle purchase, as once upon a time this unit belonged to the US Air Force. I couldn't find if this was a later import or maybe it had been used on one of the US Air Force's UK bases. This ID number didn't return any results, but it's set up as a wrecker and I'm sure it still does a pretty good job today. There were a vast number of fire engines at the Festival of Transport, with some fairly modern units at one end of the row and a wealth of vintage machines scattered throughout the lines going right back to the 50s and 60s. These two matching 1960 Bedford J5s from West Sussex are regulars at the shows and have been fantastically preserved, complete with ladders and equipment loadouts. Many of these appliances were built locally by HCB Angus of Hampshire and used Bedford, Leyland, Perkins and Mercedes-Benz engines throughout the years. Inside is immaculate, and it has period uniforms and helmets and even more equipment laid out in the cab. Another slightly newer Bedford from Hampshire is parked next to a Defender rescue vehicle, complete with its loadout of tools neatly displayed in front of it. Less cut out for fighting fires, it still has a water pump, all manner of hand tools, plus some hefty cutting equipment, including an angle grinder and what I think are some early cutting jaws in their original box, as well as breathing apparatus. Further back down the rows, one of the more modern engines from Blackwall London Fire Brigade has a loadout on display in its side access roller shutter compartments. Much more convenient, but not as quick or easy to get to places as the Defender. Returning back down to the beginning of the appliance lineup, among some of the much more modern 1990s Volvo and Mercedes units we find Mabel, 1956 Ford F350 based rescue ambulance. These were designed and built for use in Bermuda and in the United Kingdom as an airfield rescue tender. Inside has been beautifully restored and these can be hired for weddings among many other occasions. Leaving behind the commercial vehicles, but definitely keeping the vast expanses of sheet metal, we have this Coupe de Ville, stretching almost 19 feet or 5.7 meters. These were some of the biggest cars the US ever produced in a two-door. Eventually, these engines crept up to 8 litres in the Caddy, the largest they ever put in a mass production passenger vehicle for decades to come. Thanks to the oil crisis and the emissions regulations they implemented as a result, the power output dropped absurdly low and gave us some ridiculously huge engines that made almost no power throughout the malaise period. Going back a few years now to the pre-war era, there were plenty of cars on display. This 1934 Ford Hot Rod has a flathead V8 under the hood, complete with Offenhauser heads, which have improved cooling performance over the stock ones thanks to the fins. This car has an interesting history, previously being owned by Lieutenant General Sir Frederick Browning and author Daphne du Maurier's family car, before coming the hot rod we see here. Browning commanded the 1st Airborne Division in Operation Torch into North Africa and then joined Operation Market Garden as commander of the 1st Airborne Corps. The current owners have a wealth of history on the vehicle and its transformation, which is really great to see. This Model A is actually of Canadian origin, built in Windsor, Ontario, just on the other side of the river to the Rouge plant, Ford's main manufacturing headquarters in Detroit, Michigan. It still has the original 3.3 litre 4-cylinder from 1928 and believed to have undergone some degree of restoration in the 1980s before being imported into the UK in 1999, and since then it really hasn't needed any major work besides the usual maintenance. Moving on to some UK offerings from the interwar period, we have this Rolls-Royce 2025, which is a fabulous looking drop-top body from the coach builders back when you just ordered a chassis and had the body made to your own specifications. And next to it, a little earlier, a little more everyman than the Rolls, is this Morris Oxford, celebrating 100 years of motoring this year. These were larger than the Morris Cowley and could comfortably carry 5 adults, but retained the bullnose grille from the smaller predecessor, hence the name. For 100 years old, it looks great, obviously well cared for and great to see it out and about. Before the Mini, the small family car of choice was the Austin A30, and this is the short-lived evolution, the A35. These had a larger A-Series engine than the A30 with 5 more horsepower and ran for a few years before the classic Mini came to be, which carried the A-Series onward. And parked next to the tiny A35 is this comparatively giant first-generation Bel Air 4-door sedan. It's fitted with an early Powerglide automatic gearbox and enough chrome which probably weighs more than the A35 next to it. This one also has an extended rear bumper with a spare tyre bustle mounted to the platform, adding about a foot to the overall length, and of course, more chrome. Another Model A, similar to the one we saw earlier, but this time looking much smaller and sleeker, being both lower to the ground and fenderless, with some enormous rear tyres poking out from the side. The engine-turned dash looks great, as does the whole interior, in a simple black with silver and chrome accents. It really makes for a sleek appearance, going all the way down into the steering and axle braces, the drums, the tank on the front, and all of the other accessories around the grille. It has what I think is a 5.4 litre Ford modular V8 hiding underneath the bonnet, which certainly explains the need for the giant tyres on the back, given they're typically well over 300 horsepower. Going back a few more years, we have one of the very last Singer 10s produced, as production ended in 1924 after some 6,000 units being built. As a later model, this has overhead instead of side valves, and the gearbox is mated directly to the engine in a more modern traditional way instead of being on the rear axle or mid-mounted as was the pre-1922 and 23 cars respectively. Singer actually played a huge part in the founding of Aston Martin. Lionel Martin having started with a 10, which he improved, worked on the engine power and eventually achieved 70 miles an hour before going on to start a business tuning other cars and then ultimately founding Aston Martin as we know it. Now one of the longest lasting models so far, going almost 20 years, Austin produced nearly 90,000 of these right up to the Second World War when production unsurprisingly ended. These were actually known for being incredibly reliable for the time, synonymous with indestructibility, and as a result flew out of the showroom doors. Our last car from the interwar period is this Humber light car, number 1855 off the line, and turning 100 just last year. It's undergone some extensive restoration, including new wood body framing, new panels together with a mechanical overhaul, and it looks absolutely great for having had it all done. One thing that wasn't overhauled though was the front brakes, because up until 1926 the light cars at least weren't sold with any front brakes, only rear drums with a separate set of shoes that operated on the handbrake. Moving back into the modern era, we have this full track-ready Mark I Golf GTI, complete with extra-wide Berg Cup arches and Volkswagen racing livery. I've no doubt this is probably quicker and more powerful than a stock GTI was in 1983, and it'll handle much better with a wider track, better suspension and sticky tyres, not to mention the overall stiffer chassis thanks to that giant roll cage. The extra width really suits these cars, and it's no surprise so many end up wide-tracked as a result. And if you're looking to cruise around in the summer, roof down in the English countryside, or travel down through Europe to the Riviera, you could do a lot worse than a classic R107 Benz with a 5-litre V8 under the bonnet. These have aged like a fine wine, and for a modern classic drop top, they're hard to beat. The M117 engines have an outstanding reputation for reliability and longevity, so long as they're looked after, perfect for worry-free touring. The 59 Eldorado is probably one of the most iconic Cadillacs ever made. A decade of chrome, fins and futuristic jet-era design reached its zenith, and after 1960, these influences started to peter out and be watered down in the styling. So it's no wonder, thanks to featuring so many films, that it's become the de facto Cadillac in so many people's minds. Now something you don't see at many car shows, much less on the road, is an Alvis. This Series 3 was only made for 3 years, and with only 352 being made, that probably goes a long way towards why you don't see many anywhere. The body was actually made by coach builders Mullner Park Ward, with only the chassis and running gear coming from Alvis themselves. Grabber Switzerland actually made a variant on the same chassis with a wider grille at the front instead of the waterfall style, but kept the same stacked light arrangement. Perhaps that 500 SL is a little bit too vintage or sedate for your drop-top grand touring needs. Something which can drift around those mountain hairpins instead of waft is more your cup of tea. Well, this Silvia might be right up your street. The original naturally aspirated SR20 has been somewhat predictably swapped out for an SR20 DT from a Spec R. Now packing some boost, I'm pretty sure this is not the stock 250 horsepower even the turboed engine left the factory with. Here's something which would fit right in at the Festival of the Unexceptional, and indeed it has the sticker on the boot lid to prove it. This Charade is in fantastic condition and looking as clean as the day it came off the production line in 1987, which would make it one of the first third-gen Charades to be made. A mere 15,000 miles and a mostly garage life have no doubt helped keep this car looking as good as it does today, complete with some period accessories and the original dealer sticker on the boot window from Hillview Motors. There's even a copy of Now 12 on cassette ready to play some Phil Collins or perhaps some Salt and Pepper whenever your heart desires. Looking around this nicely kept Defender, I spotted a familiar sticker on the back door, but before we get there, can anyone enlighten me how to tell apart a Series 2 and a Series 2A, as a 1961 vehicle like this could be either from what I found online. Just above the doggo keeping out of the sun, there's a roadkill sticker, which the owner got at the same meetup David Freiberger and co attended at EBC Brakes in Northampton that we went to all the way back in 2017 in episode 4 of PedalBox. Becoming more uncommon with each passing year are the MG variants of the Rover 75, the MG-ZT. However, this one is especially rare, as instead of the usual K or KV6 engine, this has a 4.6 modular Ford V8, which makes a respectable 260 horsepower from the factory. But that's not where this one stayed. Thanks to a Roush blower nestled on the top of the intake, this one makes 365 horsepower and significantly more torque. Plus, it has that delightful supercharger whine when you open up the throttle. Probably not how Rover envisaged the 75 ending up. This final year production Ford console rolled off the line just 1 year before the model departed the Zephyr mark to stand on its own. Its all-original looking Mark II has definitely seen some sun over the years, but while the paint has faded, it doesn't look like it's picked up much, if any, rust on the body panels. Fords from this era were pretty prone to disintegration, so it's nice to see at least one has survived the rot. Even the patina itself is pretty tasteful. While you could restore it, as the leather roof has necessitated being done, you'd lose a lot of the character of the car as it stands now, and I'd rather see it this way than absolutely pristine. Here we have another vehicle built during the final production year for its model, the Reliant Sabre 6. The Sabre only lasted 4 years from beginning to end, and originally it had the same 1.7 litre Ford engine as the console we just looked at a moment ago. However, in 1962 they opted to upgrade to the 2.6 litre from the same Zephyr engine line, which Reliant opted to continue through into the Scimitar, which ultimately replaced the Sabre the following year. This one even has a mechanical rally computer on the dashboard and a stopwatch on the tunnel, so I'm guessing, or hoping, maybe it still does some rallying to this day. Next to the Sabre, one of the classic pairings of cars and livery, a Ford GT40 in Gulf racing colours, one of the all-time best liveries out there. This one is a very modern replica from 2020 made by Superformance, and even comes with air conditioning. It'll take any Ford 289, 302 or 351 Windsor small block as standard, although they recommend the Roush prepared engine, and for the Mark II version, it'll even take the 427 big block if desired. All too soon it's time to go and everyone starts filing out of the site, but with that comes the opportunity to walk through the vast sea of rumbling engines past cars we missed for one reason or another. Thanks very much for watching. I'm going to leave this walk through the Exodus, but stick around for something I'm sorely disappointed I missed whilst walking around. A classic Mini made up to look like a Bluesmobile, complete with a full-sized speaker on the roof completely dwarfing the car. Make sure you subscribe for more videos, check out some of our project builds. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again in another episode.